Satnam, beautiful Sovereign Sisters, Satnam, and welcome back to the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement Podcast. This week, we're going to talk about something that confuses so many women, especially on the path of generational healing. And what I'm referring to is actually fear. Because a lot of women actually just believe that fear, for some reason, it's all in their mind. But what if fear has actually been living in your kidneys this entire time? This week in our body system series and the connection with generational healing and trauma, we're actually focusing on the urinary system. You know, the kidneys, bladder, urethra, pelvic floor, and the life giving role of water in your body. And this conversation absolutely matters because I don't know if you knew, but the urinary system is not just about elimination. It's actually one of the body's like main survival and safety systems. It is literally the system that filters and cleans your blood. It regulates your water and your minerals. It partners with your adrenal glands to control all of your stress hormones. And it also stabilizes the fear responses in your nervous system. I don't know if you knew that. Now, from a generational trauma perspective, the urinary system is often one of the very first systems that's actually shaped by chronic fear, by scarcity, by instability, by survival conditioning due to growing up in a dysfunctional home. Now, from a spiritual perspective, it literally is one of the primary systems that's connected to faith, to fear, to trust, and to the ability to actually feel safe in your body. Now, today, we're going to bridge biology, generational history, Kundalini Yoga therapy, and also the teachings of Jesus Christ, of Jeshua, through A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy to answer one core question. How does fear actually get written into our body? And how does faith begin to rewrite it? And what does this even have to do with the urinary system, the kidneys, and generational trauma? So, in this episode, I'm going to explain and break down to you how the urinary system works in a way that even a child can understand it, how trauma and chronic stress, which of course we know is perpetuated by generational trauma, actually reshape your entire urinary system biologically. We're also going to look at how generational trauma patterns, the actual patterns, create the fear in the system across generation, and on to the next generation, and how these patterns are creating also the energetic and Kundalini Yoga perspective of your root chakra needing to be restabilized. We're going to look at the Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy perspective from Jesus Christ, Jeshua, to actually learn about fear and how do we transcend fear, false evidence appearing real. And let me tell you, it's a very high consciousness teaching that if you can accept today with your heart, will liberate you, not just you, but seven generations before and after you. And we're also going to address techniques, even a beautiful recipe that you can start actually integrating in your life to help you really reset the urinary system and heal from any patterns of generational trauma that have been causing a lot of chronic stress. So, welcome. If you're new to the podcast episode, I am Veronica Barragan, trauma informed Kundalini Yoga therapist and the founder of the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, an online virtual sanctuary and movement for first time generational cycle breakers like you. So, welcome to this week's episode. And I think when we think about the urinary system, it doesn't sound like something that's like super sexy or like, oh my God, I need to learn about the urinary system. But once you know how much of it is connected to the fear that you feel throughout your days, you're not only going to be excited to understand how it works, but you're also going to feel really empowered to know that regardless of how many patterns of generational trauma have impacted this part of your being, that you can absolutely heal it. There's more than hope here. We're really rooting what we're talking about in grounded faith, in science, and also, of course, in spirituality, which is actually the real truth. So, first and foremost, let's understand what in the world is the urinary system, right? If you want to take some time here to grab something to write on wherever you want to get your sage ready. I have mine going right here. Some coffee, some tea. I got my coffee right here. Feel free to do that because you're gonna really want to take this in and not only apply it, but really know how powerful you are and how powerful your body actually is. So, we're going to break down the urinary system first so that you better understand what I'm talking about. So, your urinary system is basically, think of it as like your body's like cleanup and your entire balance team. Its job is actually to clean up your blood and to keep the right amount of water and minerals in your blood, which is why today, as we talk about the urinary system, we have to talk about water too. And not in only the way that you think about it, drinking it, of course, is going to be important, but also the esoteric knowledge behind it. Because once you connect both, you really can realize that wow, we are incredibly wise. Our bodies are so wise, and we have so much support to beyond heal ourselves, reveal ourselves, because that's what Kundalini yoga does for us. It's more than healing. It's revealing who you are at your core, the Christ consciousness, a beautiful expression of God herself. So first and foremost, what is the urinary system? It is actually comprised of four different parts. So the first part is your kidneys. I think everyone's familiar with that. They're two bean-shaped, think of them as like filters that sit actually in your lower back. And then we have what is known as the bladder. Now, this is a very stretchy storage tank that holds urine. Then we also have, as part of the urinary system, the urethra. Now, the urethra is like a tube that carries urine out of the body. And then we have our pelvic floor, very important, especially for women, because these are the muscles that hold and support this entire whole system from underneath. Now, what does the urinary system even do? Well, first of all and foremost, on all day long, your urinary system is basically assisting your heart because your heart is pumping blood through your entire body. Then that blood passes through your kidneys, which are in the back. Then the kidneys, they're gonna act like tiny little strainers. You know, when you're cooking and you gotta strain something, that's what the kidneys do too. And they pull out the waste, the extra water, the extra salt and minerals. And then that waste and extra water becomes urine. And then the clean blood goes back into your body, and then the urine travels to the bladder. And then lastly, when the bladder is actually full, your body releases it. And this cycle happens over and over again every single day to keep you alive and balanced. Isn't that amazing? Like, think about your body like it's doing this on its own. I think we take our bodies for granted and the wisdom when we finally realize how wise they are. Sometimes it's like when we hit an illness or something like that, we wish like for the simple things like, oh my God, my urinary system's working, or my heart's actually palpitating and doing what it needs to do. So really understand like you are so wise and your body is just as wise and is always communicating with you. Even when we talk about the things like that affected, like generational trauma, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you failed. It just means your body needs a reset. It needs to rest. That's all. So now we have to focus when we talk about fear, and this is very much connected to generational trauma, about we have to focus on the kidneys. Why? Because the kidneys are very much correlated to fear, and you're going to see why. Now, the kidneys biologically, they do a lot of work within your body. The kidneys don't just make urine, they also help your body like balance water so you don't like literally dry out. They balance the salt and the minerals so your muscles and nerves actually work. They help control your blood pressure. They work with the adrenal glands also to manage stress hormones, which is why we're going to talk about water and the adrenal glands because a lot of us have constant anxiety and it's truly correlated to lack of water hydration that is then putting pressure on the adrenals. So you'll notice that if you actually like are dehydrated, you're going to feel even more anxious. So they play a very important role because they are handling and managing your entire stress hormones, which you know that we talked about the endocrine system here in our podcast. If you missed that podcast episode, you got to go listen to it because the endocrine system is directly correlated to the hormones. And by you understanding how that works, you're going to see that again, you're not broken, that there's a way to actually bring that back into harmony, right? So the adrenals work with the stress hormones, and they actually the kidneys actually also keep your bones very strong by balancing minerals like calcium, like phosphorus. So in essence, what this means is that your kidneys impact your energy levels, your stress levels, your bones, your muscles, your heart, your entire nervous system. And this is why it's incredibly important to understand how to reset it and how to rewire it from chronic stress due to patterns of generational trauma. Now, because the urinary system is one of the main body's cleaning out systems, it is very vital that we understand that it does this in three main ways to remove the waste. First, the way it works is that the lungs remove waste gas when you breathe out. So it's an inhale, exhale, right? This is why we have to re educate our nervous system in Kundalini yoga therapy through breath. Because most of us, when we've been through trauma, our nervous system stay in fight and flight, and a lot of us, it wasn't just one experience. So there's post traumatic stress, which is you experience something very traumatic, like someone in your family dying and you being not be able to work with that or work through the grief, versus most people who have gone through patterns of generational trauma, meaning the traumatic experience 95% of it. Somebody in your lineage has experienced it. And not just that, it turns into complex post traumatic stress because many of us actually, it wasn't just one event that was traumatic, it was an entire lifetime. Like growing up in a very dysfunctional family where there was constant abuse as a child, anger, yelling, violence, infidelities, growing up with a mother who was ill, who was depressed herself because of the generational trauma, abandonment from a father, addiction in a father, all of those things, when you constantly live in that environment, even as an adult, because a lot of these things don't heal just because you turn into an adult, then that creates complex post traumatic stress. Now, it's not a disorder because it's just a dysregulated moment, and we can change that through changing your nervous system and your brain through Kundalini Yoga therapy and, of course, Emerco spiritual psychotherapy. And we can change that so that it impacts your entire systems, your endocrine system and your urinary system and your kidneys, which is what we're talking about here today. So I'm giving you these examples so you see how it happens, but just because it sounds like so grandiose, it doesn't mean that you can't heal it. That I can assure you of, okay? So now, your body has three main ways to remove all this waste, right? The lungs remove the waste when you breathe out. The skin even removes waste through your sweating. The digestive system, which we did a whole podcast episode on as well, it's going to remove solid waste. The urinary system removes liquid waste and it cleans your blood, believe it or not. So if the urinary system is not working well, and we're going to talk about why it doesn't work well, it's the waste is going to build up. You're going to have stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that are going to rise. Why? Because if you're under chronic stress or you haven't healed from generational trauma, your body still thinks it needs to defend you. It doesn't know that the experience happened 20, 50, 100 years ago. So it because it feels like it needs to defend you, the cortisol and adrenaline are going to rise and the good feeling hormones are going to be blocked or depleted. So when the urinary system isn't working, it is gonna affect your hormones, which then means it's gonna affect your energy levels. Your energy is gonna drop. You're always gonna feel tired, and then the whole body is gonna feel it because it's kind of like a rippling effect. It's kind of like Jenga, right? You put the wrong one in, the chronic stress and trauma, and then all of a sudden they all fall apart. That's why we're doing this series of once a week. We're looking at each of the systems of your body. We're seeing how trauma impacts it, and we're demonstrating how to get to the root cause because you don't want to have that rippling Jenga effect where everything crashes at the same time, which often does. So people and women call like burnout, or again, then something physical showing up as a disease. So, in essence, to understand this, understand that your kidneys are like the water purification system of your entire body. So if they are stressed, chronic stress, the whole body is going to feel stressed. When they are supported, which we're going to look at some solutions today, your whole body is going to become more stable. Now, we have to talk about water in order to talk about the urinary system and especially the kidneys and fear. Your body is 60 to 70% water. And this is why the moon cycles impact us, especially as women, so much, but all human beings, because we're mostly made of water. You know, when there's a full moon, a new moon, there's an incredible impact from the moon cycles on the waves of the ocean. And you can see this, the tides change, right? Same thing happens within you. And this is even why police officers like they prepare themselves for the full moon because we're mostly water. A lot of things happen on the full moon, especially if you're not channeling that energy. We always have ritual inside of our community, the Sovereign Sister Sanctuary, which you can find out more information about below here in the description. And every full moon, every new moon, every solstice, equinox, eclipse, we have a morning sadhana, which is meditation and community. Why? Because as it is, the emotions are already very overwhelmed. They can feel very like you can feel very like sensitive to everything that's happening. And when we integrate meditation on those days, we can not only work with the emotions, but like really work with these portals of like downloads and clarity. Most people get stuck because the emotions are so overwhelming that these moon cycles actually bring forth a lot of anxiety and a lot of also like feelings of just like something's gonna happen. And that's why there's also so much chaos, and police officers even prepare themselves, especially during the full moon, because they kind of expect people to be a little bit more on the edge. But that doesn't have to be you, especially if you practice meditation. And so your blood is also mostly water, and your kidneys filter water to clean your blood. So see how it's all connected? So every cell in your body, it needs water to make energy, period. And your brain needs water to think clearly and to regulate emotion. And on a physical level, water is literally like your body's entire transport system. It carries nutrients, it removes waste, it cools the body, it keeps tissue soft and very flexible. But if you even think about this on an esoteric, like spiritual level, water is way more than just fluid. Across like every ancient tradition, water really represents life. It represents memory. There's so many scientific studies on you being able to like talk to your water and pray to it, or even put like a label on it, like a just something that you could tape on the actual water, and how that changes your cells, and how that is an incredible way to materialize and co-create with God because it holds memory and it holds emotion. Emotions, in fact, are energy and motion. And think about it, if you're dehydrated, the emotions cannot flow. And that's why they get stuck. That's why they either get stuck or they overwhelm you, right? Because there's no ability for them to do what they need to do. Your emotions are not the problem. Your emotions are created from the perceptions that you are giving your experiences, life. If you want to change your emotions, you got to change your perception. That's spiritual psychotherapy, of Course in Miracles. We're going to get into that right now as it relates to fear in the kidneys. But in essence, when you're hydrated, let's say something happens in your family where somebody transitions, right? Like, we don't do this work of healing ourselves and 7 generations before and after us, so nothing bad ever happens. We do this work to develop a nervous system to stay in the right mind, right? Where we're making decisions in our life about hydrating ourselves, about self-care, about honoring ourselves so that when life does happen, you have the capacity to face it, to transcend it. And most of us, because we're already so stressed out, we're reaching for the wrong foods, like we talked about in the digestive system, because our nervous systems are hijacked, and we're definitely not drinking water. And to be honest with you, more people actually become dehydrated in December in the winter time than in the summertime. Because in the summertime it's hot, right? So you're kind of like tending to like I crave the water. But in the wintertime, it's cold. So you don't crave it. You crave the coffee, right? And all those things. When your nervous system is regulated through Kundalini Yoga meditation, you don't skip over these things. You know, it's not out of guilt. It's more of like, oh, my body needs this. And you pay attention to your body needs and you fill yourself up with water, right? Or if you get on this track of like, I've been drinking too much coffee or I've been drinking nothing, everything but water, then you become aware of that and you correct it without any guilt or shame. But the problem here is that most of us, especially we lived under chronic stress due to generational trauma, because our nervous systems are hijacked, we don't have the capacity to even become aware. We don't realize, oh my God, I haven't drank water in how long? And that is connected to my anxiety, to my chronic stress. So it kind of all works together. But if you start with the somatic healing, with the holistic healing of body, mind, and spirit, then everything else is going to function together too. So the water in itself, we know esoterically, it's about emotion, it's about your subconscious mind, it's the womb of creation. Think about it. And it's also the receptive feminine current of God, of the expression of the creator, of source. Water literally is the element that holds feeling. This is why emotions feel like they either flow, they flood, or they're gonna get stuck. Your body's water literally carries your entire emotional history. Now, from a subtle energy perspective, water holds vibration. Water carries information. Water records stress and safety. Water transmits the signals of the nervous system through the fascia and tissue. Remember we talked about the fascia? So the fascia is like this like organ, think of it, but it's like collagen. And it's a collagen that literally connects and impacts and moves through all of your organs. And this collagen is piezoelectric. And what that means is that it sends energy or signals to your body. You have to keep your fascia hydrated, and you don't just keep it hydrated through drinking water. It's movement of breath and prana. That's why in Kundalini Yoga, it's a very important part through the chanting of mantra, through the meditations, through breathing in specific ways, like we talked about last week, how to reduce stress, left nostril breathing. If you missed that episode, go catch it because it's really important. But in essence, fascia, the way we keep it hydrated is through movement, and movement is not just the drinking of the water, it's through meditation. It's through chanting mantra, it's through breathing. And if that keeps it hydrated, then the signals that it is sending to your body are going to change. It's probably been sending signals because it's dehydrated, not just because you haven't drank enough water. There's a lot of people that drink a lot of water and it's still dehydrated. Why? Well, first, the water that we have a lot access to doesn't have all the minerals that we need. But second, if you are drinking a lot of water, but you are unconsciously still working through a lot of trauma and you have all of these emotions that literally like guide your life, like anger, rage, and you're not moving them, it's gonna dehydrate your fascia. Why? Because your fascia is using up that hydration to work with all of these emotions that you're having unconsciously. So this is why we have to shift our perceptions, right? And this is why through Kundalini Yoga therapy, we can keep the fascia very hydrated through chanting mantra, through breathing. So water in itself literally is what allows us to transmit the signals of the nervous system through the fascia and through the tissues to keep us nice and healthy. So when your water is healthy and it's moving and clean, right? Your emotions are going to move, your thoughts are going to change, the nervous system is going to regulate itself, your brain is going to get rewired, your kidneys can finally relax and they can finally do their work, which is cleanse, not try to defend you, right? So, what happens when we're dehydrated physically and energetically? A lot of things. First, it's kind of, I mean, once you hear this, you'll be like, I need my water. I need to be drinking my water, plus doing my meditation, right? Because the water is not going to be enough. So, what happens when you actually are dehydrated? Your blood becomes thicker. Why? Because you lose water, reducing your overall blood volume, which forces your heart to pump harder and increases the risk of clots, impacting all of your circulation. Staying hydrated maintains basically very proper blood volume, and also it supports your heart health and it prevents blockages. So that's pretty important, right? And this is also connected to your kidneys because when you're hydrated, your kidneys are going to work harder. I'm dehydrated, your kidneys are going to work way harder. Your adrenal glands are going to work harder. That's why I was telling you, most of us that are feeling the anxiety, it's part of the dehydration. And then the stress hormones are going to become more concentrated, constant cortisol, adrenaline. Adrenal glands are going to strain and anxiety. You're going to have pressure from the chronic stress and the dehydration, and you're going to feel a lot more tired, period. But dehydration, again, we have to understand it doesn't just come from not drinking water. It comes from chronic stress, suppressed emotions, a hypervigilant brain. What is that? Well, since you were a child, if you experience chronic trauma, chronic stress due to trauma, complex post-traumatic stress, what's going to happen is that your entire brain is going to be constantly looking for the other shoe to drop. It's called hypervigilance, and it does this because it's trying to protect you. So if you were a little girl where peace was not like 24/7, or all of a sudden there was peace, but then fighting started, violence, infidelity, all these things that happen, abuse, then you're like your brain is bracing itself for like the next bad thing to happen. And because of that, because you're in hypervigilant mode, your nervous system is stuck in fight and flight, which means that you don't feel safe in your body. And that is directly connected to dehydration as well. So what that looks like is you're constantly living in survival mode, just the way your ancestors did, right? Now, on an energetic level, all of this unprocessed emotion, again, we're not doing this consciously. It's unconscious that we have unprocessed emotion because we don't have the nervous system capacity to deal with these emotions. So these unprocessed emotions, it changes the nervous system functionality. When feelings are basically not processed, the body is gonna contract. There's a part of the body specifically where we've talked about this a lot, which is known as the psoas muscle. And the psoas muscle sits in behind the pelvis area. And when you experience trauma, your psoas contracts. But the problem here, because it's like bracing itself for the danger, right? But the problem here is that 20 years later, the trauma is not happening anymore. You could be on vacation. And because you didn't release the emotions from the body, because the body keeps score, your psoas is gonna still keep contracting throughout the day. Anytime you get triggered about, and we get triggered by many different things like smells, we see something on TV, we see something on social media, and it triggers something in us, right? And then the psoas doesn't know that it happened 50 years ago, so it's gonna contract. It's gonna contract. And if it contracts unconscious like that throughout your entire life, that's a big problem. It's a big problem for your other organs. It affects your spine. It affects your kidneys. It affects your liver. And if it's affecting all of these things, then you better believe, again, it's going to be a rippling effect that connects it all. So, in essence, what you're doing with on an energetic level is you're working to be able to release this unconscious contraction of the psoas. And that's why Kundalini Yoga therapy is so effective. And in the 10-week post-traumatic stress protocol that I was taught as a Kundalini Yoga therapist that actually helps people move from post-traumatic stress and complex post-traumatic stress to recovery, the meditations and the mantras that we use are very specific in working with the psoas and releasing this traumatic memory from there. So the body's going to contract, your fascia is going to tighten, like we talked about. Your kidneys are going to stay vigilant. They're going to be like looking out, right? And your adrenals are going to stay in super high alert. That means also that your pelvic floor is going to really grip all the time without even realizing that it's doing it. Why? Because the brain's like, we're not safe, we're not safe. Again, even if it happened like 20, 50 years ago. Now, this constant internal dryness, because that's what it is, it's going to put pressure on everything else: kidneys, adrenal glands, bladder, your pelvic floor. And if you look at this from the ancestral lens, many of our lineages lived in emotional drought. Fear was not expressed. They had to worry about surviving the day. How am I going to feed my children? How am I going to survive this mental anguish because of the abuse that they had gone through, right? Grief especially was not processed. How many of your ancestors, something happened tragically in their life, but they had to figure it out. They didn't have time to rest. They didn't have time to grieve. Why? Because they had to go to work. They had to bring home money for the kids. They had to survive. So this is why grief especially gets stuck in the body, and why it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy where families then believe that they're cursed. No, you're not cursed. Your brain is hypervigilant and your nervous system is in fight and flight, which is basically making you believe that something bad is going to continue to happen to you. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's not God like trying to teach you through suffering. That's one of the things that our ancestors, that we're healing from, that our ancestors were programmed through religion to believe like that suffering is like spiritual. So it turned them into like martyrs. It turned them into the state of victim mentality, powerlessness. And again, this is not blaming or saying anything bad, because I love my ancestors. I love my grandmas. I love my grandpas, my great grandpas, and the ancient ancestors like the Purepecha. I love them so much and I honor them and respect them, but they only knew what they knew. My grandmother, she had to survive. She had 8 kids she had to raise on her own when my grandfather was unalived. So I don't blame her. She did the best that she could, but you and I, we also need to do the best that we can. And when we know that this is what's happening in our bodies, and we also have the tools, which is what we're talking about here today, then that's how you choose yourself as a cycle breaker, right? Like, a lot of people say cycle breakers are the chosen ones. Well, guess what? We're all chosen. Every one of us is chosen to break cycles and to accept the Christ consciousness through unconditional love and forgiveness. That's like our birthright as a soul. But you have to choose yourself, and you have to be willing to call upon a higher power to assist you through these things, which many people who have been through trauma cannot do, because they wonder, where was this higher power when I was going through all of this pain, right? So when your ancestors were not able to use these tools to release grief, when they were not allowed to rest because they had to figure out how to survive, that's the emotional dehydration patterns that I'm talking about, that become physical dehydration from generation to generation to generation to generation. And this is why when I think about the generational healing journey, to me it's an ancestral garden. You incarnate in these bodies, and our only work is to tend to the garden. And tending to the garden for me, think about the water that we're talking about. Water is what irrigates the ancestral garden of the body. Fear dries up the soil, right? Faith allows the waters to return. And to me, that water is connected to light, right? And light is what we water the garden with through our meditation practice, like literally. Like, you are a temple, you just for God, right? And God resides within your temple, within inner temple, right? And when we meditate, especially with Kundalini yoga is the science of angles. Angels also is another word that means angels, and we all have angels that protect us and ancestors that protect us. So when you practice Kundalini Yoga, which is the perfect science of angels, you're allowing light to come into the temple. That's what I mean, watering the ancestral garden. Most of us don't want to water the ancestral garden because there's a lot of pain there. There's a lot of weeds, and it's dark and it hasn't received light for a long time. Why? Because generational trauma patterns, very sadly, these abuse patterns happen within the family, right? And because of that, we don't want to reconnect to our roots. We don't want to get to the root cause. It's too painful. None of our ancestors had the nervous system capacity to do that. But when with meditation, that's where water moves freely again. That's where the light hits the garden again. And that's where healing accelerates. That's where the kidneys are going to change. The nervous system is going to regulate itself. The brain is going to be rewired. And that's when you, as the rose, you are the rose. The teachings of Kundalini Yoga, Jogi Bhajan once said that prosperity is the rose that is blooming. And think about it. We were talking about this in our community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, because this month we're working on disrupting the scarcity, poverty, generational trauma pattern and actually co-creating generational wealth with God. And we were talking about how the rose can only bloom and how the rose can only bloom through care. And my sister Lizzie, who teaches A Course in Miracles on Tuesdays in our community, was talking about how the rose is like the hardest flower to take care of. It requires so much attention. It requires patience. It requires surrender. It requires relationship. But the rose knows she's beautiful, right? She just needs to bloom. And prosperity is you blooming as the rose and sharing your fragrance with the world. But if your ancestors have lived under patterns of fear because of the traumas that they went through, that gets passed down. Epigenetics proves that, right? So you, as a soul incarnating into these bodies, which by the way, we pick our parents, you don't tend to the garden. You don't meditate. You don't heal yourself. You don't water the garden. You believe rest is bad. You believe you gotta survive because your nervous system is hijacked. And then what happens? The patterns keep repeating. And then you, as the rose, you don't bloom in this incarnation. So you gotta repeat it again until you understand that the rose blooms in perfect divine timing with the cycles of Mother Earth and that you're worthy. But you gotta water the garden. And how do we water the garden? How do we tend to the garden? It's through our meditation practice, it's through our devotion to a higher power, which is why we have to rewire our nervous system because trauma impacts it in such a big way, especially the urinary system. The urinary system we talked about is part the kidneys, right? And the adrenal glands. And the kidneys and the adrenal glands, they work as a very functional unit. And so the adrenals, they sit right on top of the kidneys, right behind you, and they're going to release adrenaline, cortisol, all these stress hormones, right? So when you've experienced trauma, because it doesn't have to be happening right now, it could happen a long time ago, the body is going to live in long-term stress chemistry. That's what that is. Your cortisol levels are gonna stay very high, which is not a good idea. I mean, cortisol is there to defend you if a bear is gonna come attack you and adrenaline, but most of us stay in these chronic states of stress. Our brain doesn't know the difference between a perceived experience and an actual experience you've experienced. So again, if it happened a long time ago, it thinks it happened a long time ago. So then your brain is going to constantly, with the nervous system, be in this state of cortisol. And that's bad, especially for women, because high level cortisols deplete all the other hormones that actually make you feel happy, like it's estradiol. That one is really, really important. I talked a lot about that in a couple of podcast episodes ago because that's like the hormone that makes you feel confident, that makes you feel beautiful, that makes you have that self-worth. So if you're constantly dehydrated because of chronic stress, not even because you're not drinking enough water, then your cortisol is going to stay high, which means it's going to deplete your estradiol production of the hormone. So that means you're gonna feel like so invisible. You're gonna have the capacity in the nervous system to be seen. So you're gonna self-sabotage your success. You're gonna sabotage your relationships because you're gonna be like, "Ah, this relationship feels too peaceful. That's not like my parents. That's not what I'm used to." So your nervous system is gonna go into like fight flight and be like, this is too good to be true. They're gonna hurt me anyways and abandon me, and then you're gonna sabotage it and create the drama. So many women create drama all the time. They're doing it unconsciously because they get to a certain point of peace, abundance, love and happiness, and then their brains and nervous system hijack them and they're like, this is too much, we can't handle this. None of our ancestors ever experienced this. So it's like sabotage, sabotage, sabotage. And they're not your enemies, your nervous system and your brain's just trying to protect you, which is why again through the inner work of Kundalini yoga therapy and of course the miracle spiritual psychotherapy, you develop a nervous system capacity to hold and allow yourself to receive more than your ancestors ever have received. And so the cortisol is going to stay high, the adrenals are going to get overworked, the kidneys are going to stay constant pressure, again, leading to all kinds of different things: chronic fatigue, anxiety, frequent urination, holding the urine in, urinary infections, pelvic floor tension, lower back pain, mineral depletion, bone weakness, even over time. Fear and survival literally live in your system. And for many women raised in scarcity, even instability, violence, emotional insecurity, the body just never learned to stay on guard. The body learned to stay on guard, excuse me, not never learned. It just, that's all it knows, right? So the stress response never turned off, and the urinary system adapted to just permanent alert. Something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. And this then becomes inherited biology. It's not just personal stress. Epigenetics proves that the way our ancestors coped with their trauma becomes our own coping mechanism until somebody changes it in the nervous system and in the brain. Now, fear in itself and generational trauma and how fear actually shows up in our bodies is very important to understand. And we're going to get into also the spiritual perspective of this, because I don't think a lot of us understand fear. Fear in itself was not even a choice for many of your ancestors. Fear was like necessary for survival. That was like their default mode. When the survival chemistry is passed down, because there's a chemical reaction that's happening in the body when you're constantly living in stress and fear, right? That's what gets passed down. High levels of cortisol, adrenaline, low levels of estradiol, progesterone, and all the good feeling chemicals, right? Hormones. So when the survival chemistry is passed down, your kidneys are going to stay in high alert, your adrenals are going to stay overactive. Your bladder is going to stay tense. And your pelvic floor is always going to stay guarded. And what does that look like? Especially for women, always feeling rushed. Like even if you're not in a hurry, have you ever like you're on your way to like an appointment or somewhere and you have more than enough time to get there, but you're in a hurry. Or you're cleaning and you're in a hurry. There's never like coherence, there's never presence. If you're someone who's always feeling rushed, you have to really pay attention to that, because what you are doing is you're kind of like not trusting the present moment and trying to get to another place. But this is what it actually looks like when we're so impacted in the kidneys, especially. We're afraid of the present moment. You also never probably fully rest, and you hold tension probably in the hips. You're also probably going to struggle to feel safe even when you're on vacation and there's a beautiful beach in front of you and you're like hyperventilating or having these anxiety thoughts. And you're also going to always feel like there's this constant internal pressure to do more, to be more, to chase more. And it's not a weakness, it's a nervous system patterned by history that is now impacting your entire urinary system, circulatory system, respiratory system. I mean, it impacts everything. And a lot of this too, you have to remember that yes, it was the violence and the abuse that we went through as children and that our parents went through, but there's also so much fear in the world. I mean, there's colonization, there's control through religion. So all of these things absolutely impacted how our nervous systems and brains and our kidneys actually function as well. So how do we actually like heal this then? I mean, now I've shared with you all these different things that impacted, and you're probably like, "Oh my God, I have all those signs. Great. Like I'm broken. There's no solution for me." It's actually simpler than you think. And in Kundalini Yoga, as a Kundalini Yoga therapist, we actually work with what is known as the root chakra, especially when it comes to the urinary system. So before we talk about the root chakra, though, let's understand what chakras even are, because a lot of people, when they hear that word, they might think it's associated with some kind of new age term, and it has nothing to do with any new age jambalaya. This is ancient science. And not only is it ancient science, but it's something that even Jesus Christ, Joshua talked about in scripture. So, first, what are the chakras? And then we're going to talk about the root chakra specifically because it's the root chakra that needs to be reset to really work with the urinary system. So, what are the chakras? So, in Kundalini Yoga therapy, chakras are energy centers along your spine, and each one corresponds to a major nerve plexus, a gland, part of the organs in the system, a psychological pattern, and even spiritual knowledge. They are not woo woo, they are not new age. Some people like to call them energetic points. Some people like to call them brains. They're chakras, okay? That's what they're called. And they are, think of them as like biospiritual maps. That's the best way to put it. And what are they biospiritual maps of? Well, biospiritual maps of how your nervous system processes safety, emotion, memory, trauma, even your intuition, even your identity and your spiritual awakening. And each chakra, think of it as like a storehouse of unconscious material, the places where the body keeps what the mind has not yet resolved. And there are seven main chakras, although in Kundalini Yoga therapy, we do say we count the aura as the eighth chakra, as the eighth chakra. But most of the time, or in a lot of different spiritual traditions, you're going to see 777, and that's why. But we do count the aura, which is your electromagnetic field, as the eighth chakra. Now, like I said, even Jesus Christ, Joshua, was talking about the chakras in scripture. He called them the seven seals. In Revelation, which was actually written by John, Christ speaks of the seven seals. In esoteric Christianity, what we are taught is that the seven seals, and what I mean by esoteric Christianity is you studying what Christ said with your heart and not just believing what a man tells you or someone else. And even what I'm telling you, if this doesn't resonate, then maybe it's not true for you, right? But when we pick up the scripture in the Bible, we ourselves can interpret it too. In the age of Aquarius, there's no middleman. And it's so important that you do that for yourself to really understand what Christ was talking about. And we also have to understand that the Bible, there's a lot of gospels that are missing that they took out on purpose so that you wouldn't truly understand what Christ was saying. And there's also like ways that it has been rewritten. There was a dude, I think his name was like King James in the 1600s, who completely rewrote the Bible based on what he wanted the Bible to say. And this guy is also known for creating a book on demonology. So I don't understand how somebody who can create a book on demonology is given the power to actually change scripture. Like that's bizarre. And this guy's like creepy. I think one of the things I read about him too was that he beheaded his own mother. But yet we trust the Bible. And he made the changes that he were thought were appropriate. I think a lot of the changes that he was trying to work with is how you're not supposed to worship a government or a kingdom. Of course, it wasn't appropriate for him, so he had to take it out, right? But in Revelation, which is written by John, Joshua speaks of the seven seals. And in Christianity, we know, or from a Christian perspective, we know that the seven seals correspond to the seven chakras, the seven spiritual centers that I'm talking about, that have to be opened, have to be purified for the mind to perceive the truth. It's your birthright through Kundalini Yoga therapy to bring, or Kundalini Yoga meditation, whatever you want to call it, to bring from the fourth vertebrae of your spine the Kundalini white tantric energy so it could reset and restabilize all of the seals, all of the chakras to go to the crown where God resides. That's why you incarnated. The sealed book in scripture is symbolic of your human body. The seven seals in scripture are the chakras right along the spine. The opening of the seals is literally spiritual awakening through your nervous system, through your brain. Why? Because your brain does not create thoughts or consciousness, it downloads them. It's like a radio that tunes in to a station and then downloads whatever that station is playing. Most of us, because we haven't opened and purified our chakras, we haven't healed from generational trauma, our brain is downloading not from God, not from the universal mind, higher source, whatever you want to call God, but from the program. Not just from the program of like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, from the generational trauma, but also this whole world is a trance. And there's a program that is being fed through social media, through culture, through governments, through all these things that then is feeding your crown, that then is creating your identity. This is why meditators, because life is one big trance, you put yourself in your own trance and you can call the bullshit when you see the bullshit. And I think a lot of us are being able to call that right now in a big way, right? And so these seven seals along the spine are the pathway to what God, or I'm sorry, what Jesus Christ, Joshua said about the staircase and allowing that energy to travel up the spine so that you can awaken, so that you can self realize that you are the Christ as well. That's why Jesus Christ said, "You will go do bigger things than I have ever done." He was a real teacher. He didn't come to say, "Follow me and do everything I say and idolize me and worship me." He was talking about following the Christ teachings, not just pretend you love me, but you don't have to act like me, meaning unconditional love and all these things, right? A lot of us, what we get confused with is Paul's teachings. And I did a lot of TikTok videos on this. So if you're not following me on TikTok, go follow me there, Veronica Barragan, I am. Because Paul was like literally like, and we talked about it in this podcast too. He was like a Roman spy that decided I'm gonna just make up my own shit and lie about Jesus coming to me because he never met Christ or Joshua, and like now enslave the human race by making them think that they're just sinners and that they are the scum of the earth because of what they did to Christ, even though it wasn't us who did it. It was them, right? And so we're all awakening to this in a very big way that this is our birthright. And that's why when we talk about even Kundalini awakening in you, it's not something you can force, you can plan for. If you're like, oh, I just want to open my Kundalini energy. Good luck, because that's divine timing. And if somebody's telling you, oh, I can open your Kundalini, run fast, because that's something that you cannot time, you cannot attach yourself to, and you cannot make a goal. It happens naturally, and sometimes it happens even if you're not practicing spiritual practices like Kundalini yoga. But Kundalini awakening in the fourth vertebrae, it becomes the book of Revelation. So that what that means is that, think about it like book of Revelation is water, fire, serpents, trumpets, the throne, the tree of life, the river of living water flowing from the throne. Even the lamb who opens the seals, I mean, it symbolizes Christ's consciousness, activating the chakras, restoring the body to safety, to clarity, to purity, to connection with God, union with God. That's what yoga means, union. So when we talk about now the root chakra as it relates to your urinary system and your kidneys, we're talking about the very first seal, right at the root, right? And this is the foundation of both the physical body and your spiritual path. The root chakra is the very first seal, and it sits right at the base of the spine, and it governs your feelings of safety, survival, your ability to trust in life, your right to exist and be seen, your right to receive support. And this chakra is directly connected to your urinary system, especially to the kidneys, to the bladder, to the pelvic floor, and to your adrenal glands. And so, because of that, this is where the first place trauma destabilizes you. It's in the root chakra. When the root chakra becomes unstable, why? Because of trauma. We're talking about all types of abuses: sexual, emotional, physical. We're talking about violence. You simply do not feel rooted like a tree, that even though there's a lot of storms, the tree is rooted in God, right? When we go through trauma, we don't feel that way. And any little wind feels like it topples us over because we haven't been tending to the roots. to the garden, and especially if there's been trauma. When the root chakra becomes unstable, your kidneys are gonna take that hit. Your bladder is gonna be very reactive. Your pelvic floor is gonna change. The adrenals stay stuck. Fear is gonna increase. Faith is gonna decrease. The body never is gonna feel really safe. And you're gonna basically replace survival. You're gonna replace survival with trust. And this is why fear and faith, they live in the same physical space. It's insane, I know. Literally in the body, they occupy your kidneys, your pelvic floor, your lower spine, and your adrenal glands. And now think of this from scripture. This is why the first seal has to be opened. Because until the root chakra is purified and open, the nervous system is not going to be able to trust. The body cannot rest. The adrenals cannot settle. And the mind, it cannot hear God because the brain is not downloading from God. It's downloading from the program of pain and abuse. And this is the beginning of what is known as true spiritual awakening. It's not just in the mind, it's in the foundation of your entire body. And so in Kundalini Yoga, what you're gonna hear us say a lot is what is known as root lock, mula bandh. And that's connected to what is known as your perineum. The perineum is the energetic foundation point of the body. It literally is like the muscular bridge between your genitals, your anus, the pelvic floor, and the urinary tract. Now, the root lock involves gently lifting and engaging this area. So when we start in Kundalini Yoga, you're going to notice that we tune in with the what is known as the Adi mantra. The Adi mantra clears the energy. Sound frequency, there's always a chemical reaction in the outer world, but also in the inner world that's happening. And the Adi mantra is Om Namo Gurudev Namo. And that's what we chant 3 times before we start. So when we start, you will hear me say, tighten up Mulabon or root lock. And what that means is you're gently lifting and engaging your sexual organs. You're not like clenching, you're not straining, you're just lifting and engaging. And what happens when you do that, and it doesn't just happen at the beginning of classes, there are many kriyas. So kriyas is basically a set of poses or mantras or breathing that you do in a specific order to get a specific chemical result. And then we also have what is known as meditations, right? And that's just one meditation. And they're not always like close your eyes, go into a coma. We have very, very active meditations like movement of hands, with chanting, with breathing, right? Regardless, you're going to hear sometimes within those kriyas and meditations, tighten up mulaband, tighten up root lock, right? And that's what you're doing. So by doing this repeatedly, its effects are going to basically be life changing because it's toning the urinary tract, it's strengthening your entire pelvic floor, it's stabilizing the root chakra, it's redirecting. That's the most important part. And this has been such an embodied experience for me. But what it's doing is it's redirecting the scattered energy upward. Because your energy is all over the place, right? Emotions are all over the place. But when you literally tighten up Mulaband, you're now saying this is where the energy is going. And that's how we re-educate the nervous system and the brain as well. We're learning how to channel our energy because through generational trauma, no one ever taught us, and our energy is all over the place. We're not even aware, right? So then what also happens is that a balance happens in the mind. It's gonna also help you really soothe sexual anxiety. And you might be triggered, especially if there's any kind of sexual abuse at the beginning of your practice, where if you're asked to do this, and believe me, as a Kundalini Yoga therapist who's been taught how to teach in a trauma-informed way, everything that you learn from me is invitational. I welcome you to close your eyes. I welcome you to pull Mulaband. You have your own agency. You get to decide if you want to do it that moment or not. And that's your decision. And if you don't want to do it at the moment, that doesn't that it's worthless and it's not gonna work. It just means that you're finally developing your own agency to make decisions based on how you feel. Because this journey is not all love and light. If we are doing this work, we're gonna feel emotions that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel for a long time. So you get to decide, right? But this is what it's doing in your body, redirecting the scattered energy upward, changing the mind, changing the sexual anxiety, and building deep internal safety in your body. So energetically, the root lock teaches the body, hey, you know what? I am supported. I don't have to leak my life force energy through fear. And that's life changing. So we are going to hear root lock and mula bond a lot within the Kundalini Yoga therapy and within the practice. Now, there are also great recipes that Yogi Bhajan left us in Kundalini Yoga therapy that are specific to each of the systems. And when it comes to the urinary system, he always talked about putting 2 part spinach, 1 part carrot juice, and then 2 part spinach juice, 1 part carrot juice, and drinking 1 quart of this per day. For how long? Well, it's up to you. You know, we were talking about the digestive system and the power of fasting, but you obviously need to check with your doctor, especially if you've never fasted before, and it's not recommended for a woman to fast if she's on her moon cycle or if she's pregnant. But you can definitely like reset the entire system based on your own experience with fasting. If you're somebody who has fasted before for a day or more than 3 or 5 days, like I have, then maybe you want to do like a 5 day cleanse where all you're doing is spinach juice and carrot juice and you're drinking 1 quart per day. If you want to do a quick reset, like we talked about in the digestive system podcast, 1 day a week. One day, just pick 1 day a week, and this is what you're gonna be drinking, 1 quart for that day. Now, why is this so powerful? Well, the spinach with the carrot juice together is kidney cleansing. It purifies your blood very quickly. It brings balance to the minerals. It supports your adrenals and it gives the pelvic floor that hydration that it needs. And so that's a very easy recipe that you can actually start today to help you also reset. And then when you tie it in with Kundalini Yoga meditation, I mean, you're going to be set, not just to like reset and heal your urinary system, but to end those patterns of urinary system dysfunction in your entire family, which again are very much connected to fear. And this is why we have to look at fear also from a spiritual perspective, because fear, especially as it relates to Christ consciousness and Christ and the teachings of Jeshua and Jesus Christ from a Course in Miracles perspective, fear is we are living in what many mystics also call the second coming of Christ, which is why it's so important for you to understand that the fear is going to be hijacked and it's going to be increased and quadrupled because things are not working. Like you cannot fool people the way you used to fool them in the 70s, 60s, 50s when we were all disconnected, right? And the second coming of Christ is not an outer event where someone descends from the sky like Jesus Christ and saves our asses. That's not what's gonna happen. The second coming is the awakening of the Christ in you, in your heart, in your mind, in your body, the remembrance of your innocence, the end of fear as our God. Religion has created a punishing, fearful God that sits on a chair all day and judges us. Like, think about it. You, as a parent, is that something that you would do to your child? Because we're all children of God. We are all an expression of God. God wanted to experience herself through us, right? So if you have ever had children, and even if you don't have children, you have a puppy, you have an animal that you take care of, would you sit on a chair all day and judge God? Would you force your own son, Jesus Christ, to go through what he went through thinking that it was painful? You wouldn't do that. That's the God of religion that has been told to us is mean and violent. How many people have they unalived under the name of religion, under the name of that God? Even Christ, he did not suffer on that cross. He came to teach us about the resurrection, not the crucifixion. It was because from ages 11 to 33, he went to develop his meditation. He went and studied under teachers. He wanted to teach others how to meditate. Why? To prepare for his life purpose, which was to teach us about the resurrection. He knew all of that was coming. There was a gospel of Judas that they threw out, where in this gospel of Judas, he asks Judas to betray him. And Judas is like, oh my God, no, I love you, right? But Judas knows that by him doing this, it's going to liberate not just Christ, but all of us, because Christ said, you will go do bigger things than us. So there's a second coming of Christ that's happening in all of us. And that's why the fear mongering has gone into a level that I've never experienced in my lifetime. I don't think any of our ancestors have either, because they realize that this energy is awakening in all of us. There's a beautiful book from Yogananda, one of my favorite teachers, and he wrote a book called The Second Coming of Christ. And it's two books, very thick. I have not finished it, but just from what I have started reading, it's exactly what every human being needs to understand right now. Because what he was talking about is the rebirth of Christ consciousness in each and every one of us. Again, not the arrival of a new personality to worship, but the activation of the same light that lived in Christ and Jesus and Joshua. We are all the Christ. And that's what's awakening in all of us. In the age of Aquarius, we just ended the age of Pisces, which was a cycle of Darwinian theory, survival of the fittest, God is in a church or in a guru, not in me. That's over with and done. Now we've entered into the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is there's no middleman. And Christ, Jesus, Joshua talked about the age of Aquarius in scripture. He talked about look out for the water bearer man, and that's when the times will change. Water bearer man is Aquarius. A lot of people are so scared of astrology because religion has messed them up about that. JP Morgan's Chase is quoted as saying, millionaires don't know astrology, only billionaires do. See, these people, you know how they say the devil reads the Bible more than you? These people have always studied esoteric knowledge, have always studied what Christ really said, and they've just used it for the darkness instead of the light. So, all over scripture, we're being given the permission to allow our power to rise from within by bringing to the altar our shadow, our meditation, right? Our grievances, our inability to forgive sometimes, right? But what we're entering into in this age of Aquarius is the remembrance of our innocence. We're not inherent sinners like we've been programmed to believe through religion. This is the end of fear as our God. This is the return of love as our only truth. And Yogananda expressed this in such a beautiful way because as we move from the age of Pisces, what we're doing is we are honoring this light within. In the age of Pisces, there was blind belief, there was external authority, there was fear, and a lot of secrecy, as you can tell. But as we enter into the age of Aquarius, there's inner authority, there's nervous system strength, there's embodied truth and transparency. Why? Because guess what? Your energy speaks louder than your words. And that's what Yogi Bhajan taught when he brought the technology of Kundalini Yoga from the East to the West. He taught that in the Aquarian age, your nervous system has to be strong enough to handle reality. Think about what's happening right now in the world. Like, literally, everything that we've been told is a lie. It's like Truman Show on steroids, right? And a lot of people are struggling with a lot of what is known as cognitive dissonance, where they'd rather, it's that story of Plato. So there's a story of Plato where there's these people that are chained up, all watching the screen of life in front of them, and they have these chains over their neck. But one of them realizes, oh my God, it's actually really easy to take this chain off. And he takes it off. And then he walks, he gets up and walks, and he goes around the bench and he finds and discovers a whole life beyond the chains. So he's all excited, right? He's so happy. So he runs back into the room where the other people are chained, watching that screen. And he tells them, oh my God, you could come outside. Look at the beautiful world. Do you know that those people try to unalive him? They'd rather be chained and believe in a false narrative than to be told the truth, which makes them uncomfortable. A lot of people are very uncomfortable, cognitive dissonance, in believing how corrupt the government is, the healthcare system, the school system, Hollywood, all of it all connected to the same people that are trying to program and ultimately use humanity as slavery. And so many people are going through severe cognitive dissonance where you tell them the truth and you are the enemy because they're more comfortable in believing in Santa Claus. They're more comfortable in believing in the illusion than dealing with the truth. And in the age of Aquarius, that's why the nervous system has to be incredibly strong. A yogi is one that has a neutral mind, that doesn't judge good or bad. And that's not bypassing, that's emotional intelligence. Because by the same token, these things that are showing up in the world, if it's not your life purpose, if God didn't send you to actually heal, I mean, we should all use our swords and speak up against injustice, right? I'm not saying that at all. But we all have a life purpose, right? Like my life purpose is the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary. First of all, my life purpose is to be and to just be, right? But my passion and my love for my work is in helping first time generational cycle breakers like you break the cycle. And that's my focus. Although I want to help a lot of people that are going through genocide, I know that the work I'm doing, and if I stay focused on that, it's going to impact the people going through genocide. Although I want to help all of the children that are going through horrible abuse, I know that if I help women heal themselves, their children are not going to go through abuse. They're going to end the pattern. So you have a focus in life too. And that's why we can't get distracted because life has become like one big telenovela. I mean, you don't even have to watch telenovelas anymore. Life is a telenovela. The government, the everything that shows up and pops up every day. So grab your popcorn because it's only going to get more interesting and understand that what's being revealed needs to be revealed so that it can be transformed. Same with your life, right? So as we move into the age of Aquarius, our nervous system is key, and this is where we have to be very honest. Right now, we are being fear-mongered from every direction. Media, governments, religious institutions, literally the government rebranding themselves as the evangelical church, just like the Roman Empire when it collapsed. Roman Empire collapses and then they try to rebrand themselves as the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, it worked for them so far, right? But the truth is coming to the light. So much of what calls itself Christian right now in the outer world is being used as a branding tool for control, not as a container for the real teachings of Christ. You wonder why there's so much fear, right? The same mentality, literally, that crucified Christ, fear of truth, fear of loss of power, fear of unconditional love, is still at work today. So if we don't understand fear the way Joshua, Jesus Christ actually taught it, we're going to keep letting these systems right on the back of our nervous system, on our kidneys, and then we're just going to call it faith. And that's not faith. So I want to take you through the perspective of Jesus Christ from A Course in Miracles, which is where I healed my relationship with God, with myself, with Jesus Christ, and Joshua, where I healed a lot of resentment and just kind of like disbelief and unagreement with even religion. And so what Jesus or Joshua says in A Course in Miracles is about dictating a psychological and spiritual manual for the end of fear. Yes, you can live in fearlessness. You absolutely can. But you're going to see why generational trauma prohibits that. Because in A Course in Miracles, Christ says that none of us lack faith ever. You have faith. We already have a lot of that. Problem here is that where are you placing your faith? Have you asked yourself that? Are you placing your faith in God, in love, in the Holy Spirit, in the Christ inside of you? Or, like most people, unconsciously, where do they place their faith? Well, in fear. An illusion, right? Control, survival, attack, and defend. Again, we do this unconsciously because our nervous systems become hijacked through patterns of generational trauma. And Jesus Christ, Joshua in the Course says that fear actually does not come from the world doing things to us. I know that's hard to hear, but with the regulated nervous system, you're going to understand exactly what I'm saying. Fear comes from what we believe about ourselves and others. Fear literally comes from what we believe about ourselves and others' attack thoughts within us that we project out. And that's why you feel fear. Because at the core, you know you're the Christ consciousness too. But inside of you, there's attack thoughts. There's attack of, I hate this person. You're Judas. I can't forgive this person. And so that causes within you this feeling of I'm alone. I have to protect myself because this world is so dangerous. I cannot trust life or God. Jesus Christ, when he knew he was going to get betrayed. And not once did he think that he needed to protect himself because he knew he was in a body. You're an infinite soul having this experience. The body, we become so attached to it. First of all, because we don't understand death. So if you want to understand death, that nothing is gained at birth and nothing is lost at death, definitely go listen to my podcast episode here in the channel on the journey of the soul, Day of the Dead. I did teachings on that can help you. So we don't understand death in itself. And then, unfortunately, we also live in so much fear and anger due to what we believe has been done to us. And because when a traumatic experience happens, what happens is that your brain, again, doesn't know it happened 50 years ago. So it constantly needs not only to defend itself, but then it feels like it's constantly being attacked. Have you noticed that? Like, think about somebody in your life who you know that maybe has gone through a lot of trauma, or maybe you do this. And now with social media, it's so toxic because this person, especially if they've been through a lot of trauma, they're going to think everything is about them. They're going to think, oh, that person posted something. I know you all have a family member like that, a tia or a tío, a cousin. You post something and they're like, oh, she's talking about me. She's talking about me. Literally, you truly believe that the whole world is attacking you. That's the real reason why you're afraid. But it's not because you believe that the whole world is attacking you. It's because inside of you, you are attacking the world. Wild. You have to focus on what you can control. You cannot control what someone else does to you. Jesus Christ could not control that. When he was on the cross, he said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Because he knew that what those people were doing to him was not because of who he was. He knew who he was. He was the Son of God. They were doing that because of their own pain. And he liberated us all when he said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Because he said, you will go do bigger things than I have done. And emotional intelligence is done through a regulated nervous system and brain. And you need emotional intelligence for everything, relationships, in your business. What's the true mark of a leader? A true mark of a leader to me is someone that's not looking for blame, doesn't need it. We'll take the blame, the leader, and just be solution oriented. And again, you're going to be like, oh, that's bypassing. Like, people need to get what's coming to them. They need to take accountability. Guess what? In a lot of situations, especially when it comes to generational trauma, some of the people are not even in our lives anymore. Some have transitioned. And if you continue to wait for an apology, which is the uncontrollable, or for someone to take radical accountability. And I get it. If you're afraid that the person is hurting someone else, then you're going to probably need to use your sword, meaning the sword of truth, to have a conversation and make sure that the person is not hurting anyone else. So I get that. But by the same token, your only focus is to actually heal yourself. And sovereignty, to reclaim your sovereignty, is to heal yourself, change your nervous system and brain, and not need an apology anymore. Because justice, what justice truly is, especially as it relates to A Course in Miracles, is your healing, is God bestowing the kingdom upon you because you rewired the nervous system and the brain. Now, when we have attack thoughts, we cannot confront them because they're so massive. And again, because you know you're the Christ unconsciously, you might not remember consciously, right? But you know at your core. You know that you're supposed to love unconditionally and forgive unconditionally. Then it becomes like a fragmented soul who cannot accept her shadow, and she projects it then out to the world. And then that's why really attacks show up or fearful things show up. It's not because God is punishing you, it's because that's what you are projecting from inside. So whenever you have fear patterns, what attack thought am I actually projecting out there? We are afraid of the attack in us. The part of your mind that judges other people, that condemns them, that wants to hurt other people, that wants to literally not have them as part of this existence. Instead of us facing those attack thoughts, we project them out and we see the world as one big battlefield, as one big monster. While secretly, we're terrified of the attacker. We think we are inside. Now, from Christ's perspective, and A Course in Miracles, fear is never justified. And that's why you'll hear a lot that fear is false evidence appearing real. And it's not because nothing painful happens, it's because nothing can touch the truth of what God created in you. Nothing can touch the truth, nothing of what God created in you. The only thing that truly exists, and this is not new age woo woo jambalaya, but the only truth is love. That's why love is such a powerful frequency because it can transform everything. Fear is just a misinterpretation. False evidence appearing real. A picture of reality that we made up and then believed. And that's why the Course, in A Course in Miracles, Jesus Christ gives us a very practical tool, which he calls the correction formula for fear. This is how we release it from the kidneys. And in our community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, this is what we study. Every Tuesdays, my sister Lizzie teaches that class. Course in Miracles, Spiritual Psychotherapy, because in order for you to disrupt patterns of generational trauma, we have to get to the level of the body, mind, and spirit. Kundalini therapy, like we just talked about right now with the root chakra, releases the stored memories in the body, in your psoas, traumatic experiences in the body, in the lung meridians, in the heart chakra, in the root chakra, like we talked about. Ultimately, that Kundalini rises, and it is a biological, spiritual process that then allows you to come into union with God. Now, from the reason why A Course in Miracles Spiritual Psychotherapy is part of the generational healing journey process that I not just created, but that I experienced, and that's how I was able to break my generational cycles of trauma in my lineage, is because then it brings healing at the level of your mind. What does that mean? The perceptions you're giving. Your emotions are not the problem. The perceptions you are giving to the experience is what's causing the emotions and the thoughts. So, what A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy is, some people like to call it shadow work. And it's not because Christ is going to remind you of all the things that are dark within you. Shadow work in this way is so powerful because what Christ is doing in A Course in Miracles is actually reminding you that you are the light, reminding you that you are the Christ. And that's going to trigger the shadow. That's going to trigger the ego. That's going to trigger all the limiting beliefs you have around that due to trauma, genocide, and war. And that's why it is a form of shadow work like Carl Jung talked about, that allows you to heal at the level of the mind, heal the perceptions that I'm giving to this experience. The trauma, most of us, we perceive it as this person did this to me and attacked me because I either deserved it, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, God wasn't with me, all these different reasons, right? That's not why that person did that. That person did that because of their own pain. It doesn't excuse them at all. That's not what I'm saying. But when you shift your perception that it did not happen to you because you're not loved, you're not beautiful, you're not whole because God wasn't there, then that's where the healing actually happens. And that's the miracle. The miracle is not even when it changes in the outer world, is you even being willing to see things differently, which is why we combine in the spiritual psychotherapy of A Course in Miracles to help you be willing to see things differently. Now, as it relates to fear, how do we actually practice this correction formula? Well, this is requires a few steps, 5 steps. And with these 5 steps, if you're new to this type of work, you've never done any type of generational healing work, you're probably going to be at the beginning going steps 1 through 5. But if you're somebody who has already integrated this work, any type of somatic or spiritual devotion, then sometimes you're going to jump right to number 4 or right to number 5 because you don't need the whole process anymore. But this is what we teach inside of our community so you can better develop that awareness to do it when it's happening to you, when you're feeling that fear. So in simple language, this is how it goes. So you're feeling the fear, right? So what Christ is telling us is there's fear, name it. Oh, I know this is fear. I'm just stressed or I'm just anxious. No, this is fear that I'm feeling. Call it what it is. Believe it or not, this first step is the hardest. Kundalini Yoga is the mother of awareness. You cannot change what you're not aware of. In order for you to have awareness, you have to rewire your nervous system and brain through Kundalini Yoga meditation. Because then prana, life force energy, moves through your entire systems. And it also changes your nervous system and brain from fight and flight to I can then be in the present moment. Problem here is if your nervous system is hijacked in fight and flight, high levels of stress, hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, you're not going to be in the present. You're going to be living in the future or in the past, which then you're not going to have awareness. And believe it or not, this is the hardest step, which we developed through our meditation practice of Kundalini Yoga, but it's also like the most important step because your awareness of your emotions, your awareness of fear is actually the regulating moment. A lot of people are like, well, now I'm aware. And a lot of people are like, then what do I do with this? Now that I'm aware I'm in fear, which we're going to go through the process. But just you being aware, instead of numbing it, running away from it, pretending that it's something else, that in itself is creating the foundation and the space for you to then respond differently. What breaks the cycle or pattern is not that you keep having the thought because the healing journey is not linear, it's cyclical. We rewire our nervous system and we come around the same things over and over sometimes until we can respond differently. So you become aware, then what happens? Instead of responding with, I'm not good enough, I hate this person, you say to one day through the work that we do inside our community, I'm willing to see this differently, this fear. And that response breaks the cycle. But most of us are so hijacked in our nervous system, fight and flight, we feel like World War III is happening inside of us. Why? Because our hormones are completely out of balance. The endocrine system is not functioning. The respiratory, circulatory, kidneys, urinary system, because of the chronic stress. So the word forgiveness is going to trigger you. And you being able to just be aware of your emotions is it's not a possibility for you. It's too overwhelming, which is why we project them out. So the first step in the release of fear is awareness. Christ, I know that this is fear. Joshua, I know that this is fear. Number 2, Christ says you have to deny its power and turn it around and say, I deny the power of this fear and I turn instead to you, God. And if you don't like the word God, higher power, source, whatever gratitude means to you. So I deny the power of this fear and I turn instead to you. This is not bypassing, it's refusing to worship fear as your God. And that's a big part of your generational healing journey. When you rewire your nervous system and your brain, you're no longer angry at God or a higher power. So because of that, it becomes easier for you to not only be aware, but then to say, oh my God, I deny the power of this fear and I give it to you, God. Because you know God's got your back. It's a big part of the generational healing journey. Then number three, you literally ask God to replace it with love. Help me replace this fear with love. You're not asked to do this alone. You're asked to invite the help in. Ask God, help me replace this fear with love. Or help me see this through your eyes. I am willing to see this through your eyes, God. And then number four, you have to acknowledge your true worth. I acknowledge the true creative worth of both myself and this person. I know that sounds hard, but what we give to others, we give to ourselves. So you pray for your enemy, that's what you're giving to you. If you send negative energy to the other person, that's what you give to you. And a lot of families got stuck in those cycles. That's why the trauma keeps repeating and they believe that they are cursed because it's constant just energy being sent back and forth that never ever has the essence of forgiveness or compassion and knowing that these people, again, they're not doing this to me because something's wrong with me. They're doing this, whatever they're doing, because something is unconscious in them and something's in pain in them. So then you acknowledge the true creative worth of yourself and that person. And this step takes the energy out of the attack inside of you and restores everyone to innocence in your mind. How do you really end the cycle? A lot of us think, oh, just put the person in jail, crucify them to get rid of them. That's not going to end the cycle. It's going to continue it. When your nervous system is so stable and your brain is so regulated and that's emotional intelligence, and you can speak to that other person and say, you've gone unconscious. And it's not because of me, it's because of your own pain. And I'm setting this boundary not to protect myself, but to protect you from yourself. But you still hold that vision that even the most evil person is still the Christ and they're becoming the Christ. Might take them a few lifetimes, right? But when you do that, you heal yourself and you heal that person, which guarantees that that person is not going to do that to anyone else again. I think it's worth it. I really do. So after you acknowledge your true creative worth and you can even name yourself and that person, number five is I am willing to give power to love and only to love. I am willing to give power to love and only to love. You don't have to say, I'm going to do it. Because that sounds hard, right? Like, oh my God, I'm going to give power to love. Okay, how am I going to do that if I'm so angry, I'm so upset? I am willing. Willingness is the invitation for a higher power to help you. And come on, let's be honest. A lot of the things that we are working to heal within our family and lineages, it requires a higher power. Sometimes the trauma and the pain feels so tremendous, and it is, and it's so big that there's no way that you can do this on your own. I hear a lot when women say, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being strong. And you know what that really means? That you have been relying only on your own strength and that you have not called upon the strength of God. Because once you become automatic in doing that, you're going to see that even the heaviest things can absolutely be relinquished and released only through God. And so we move through these five steps. And like I said, many of us are going to jump from awareness right to I give this to you, God, and let me see it through your eyes. And it's going to be a two-step thing, right? because we don't do this work to avoid all these things happening. We do this work to release the attack thoughts inside of us so we stop believing that anyone is attacking us, because that's why we live in fear. We don't live in fear because of what other people truly are going to do to us or all these crazy things that we think are going to happen. We live in fear because we're afraid that someone's going to find out how horrible these thoughts are inside of us. We're afraid that God's going to find out. Oh my God, if God only knew. And that's why it becomes convenient, and it becomes part of the fact that many of us don't believe that we are the Christ too, that we can't do what he did, forgive and love unconditionally, which is why then religion becomes very convenient. Because in religion, Paul said you don't have to act like Christ. All you got to do is listen to what religion and the church tells you, and then you'll be saved. Isn't that convenient? Oh, all I have to do, I could hurt people all week, be abusive, cheat on my wife, on my husband, and all I got to do is go to church on Sunday, listen to what the church said, and then I can come back on Monday and do the exact same thing over again, be a thief, rob people, and I'll be saved. Isn't that convenient? Why? Because people make forgiveness and unconditional love so difficult. And why do they make it so difficult? They're not doing this because they're evil or ignorant, because when your nervous system is hijacked, the patterns of generational trauma, you're constantly secreting adrenaline and cortisol. You don't feel safe in your body. The word forgiveness is going to trigger the bejesus out of you. Of course, like I don't even feel safe in my body. I haven't allowed myself to validate my emotions of this anger that I grew up with, this rage, which are, it's valid. There's a step we have to validate it first, right? And let it move through us. So if I can't, there's no way that I feel that I'm going to be able to do what Christ did. But it's a biological problem, it's a biophysical problem. It's not just you're broken and doomed for life. Once you start doing the work of meditation, which so when you change the nervous system and the brain, you are going to do bigger things than Christ. It really is both a biophysical process and a spiritual process. Because every time you do this 5 steps process, you're not just doing prayer, you're literally changing your entire biology. Fear in the body, we know that it keeps the adrenal glands firing, cortisol high. It holds the kidneys in complete strain. It keeps the urinary system hyperreactive. Faith in the body, completely different, activates the vagus nerve, which is a very important nerve that actually brings functionality to the nervous system and emotional regulation. It also is going to decrease all of your stress hormones, the faith, and it's going to allow the kidneys to relax. It's going to shift the body from survival to recovery. So faith is not just spiritual, faith is chemical. It literally changes how your kidneys and your adrenals operate, which are directly correlated to the entire urinary system. Now, this month, for example, inside of our community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, we're tending to the ancestral garden to disrupt patterns of generational scarcity, because even that gets passed down, to release that poverty consciousness in essence, and to open that rose of generational wealth that I was talking about. And the urinary system in this form is one of our greatest teachers, because when we place our faith in fear, and we're doing this unconsciously, what do? We overwork, we force, we push, we live in hypervigilance, we drain the soil of our own body. The kidneys stay tight and dry, the bladder and pelvic floor stay braced. The body never gets to exhale. And when we place our faith instead in God, what do? We hydrate, we rest, we allow the roots to grow, even if they're unseen. We tend to the garden. The kidneys move from crisis point into cleansing mode. The adrenals stop living on red alert. The nervous system remembers what safety feels like. So, do you see how faith is not passive? Do you see how faith is the decision to stop worshiping fear as your authority? It sounds easier said than done, but it's actually very simple and it's easy. Generational wealth, emotional, spiritual, financial cannot grow in a body that never feels safe enough to pause, to breathe, to receive. The kidneys become like an irrigation system of your entire ancestral garden. Fear dries the channels out, but faith lets living water flow again. Now, I will say that for us to really understand this and embody it, to live it, there have to be mindset shifts that have to occur. And to heal specifically the urinary system, the mindset shift has to include going from control to trust, which is why we regulate our nervous system and our brain through meditation. You have to also be able to go from hypervigilance through regulation, Kundalini Yoga meditation, changing the root chakra, which is what I was telling you about, rewires the brain through specific meditations, right? We have to go from fear to faith. Again, a biophysical, biological, and spiritual process. We have to go from forcing things in our life to learning how to allow, because that's truly what wealth and healing is all about. We have to go from scarcity to sufficiency in all aspects, not just wealth and prosperity and money, but in love, in resources, and in our connection to God. Your body literally has to be re-educated and it has to learn I am allowed to relax. I am allowed to receive. I am allowed to be supported. And so today we talked a lot about the urinary system. We talked about how it filters and purifies your blood, how it regulates your water and minerals, how it supports your bones, your blood pressure, how it partners with your adrenals, and how it manages your stress levels, how it sits at the base of your spine as part of like the root chakra, which is the first seal, and how it holds much of your fear, faith, circuitry in the kidneys, in the bladder, in the pelvic floor, in the adrenals, in the urethra. Now, in this lifetime and lineage, what this means is that trauma is going to overload it, that generational trauma patterns it, that fear dries it out and keeps it on alert, that faith is going to lets it recover and actually flow again. And healing comes through, summarizing, Kundalini Yoga therapy to regulate the nervous system. And especially if we're talking about the urinary system, the root chakra has to be engaged. In A Course in Miracles perspective, Jesus, Jeshua telling us to retrain the mind from fear to love by releasing our attack thoughts from within. Hydration and nourishment. We talked about spinach with carrot juice. We talked about water to support the kidneys and your blood. We talked about breathing and the vagus nerve and things to shift from survival to safety. And we also talked about consistent spiritual devotion to let the Christ consciousness open the seven seals and irrigate the entire ancestral garden from within. So if this episode resonated for you, remember that you're not learning actually. You're remembering. And I'd love for you to share this episode with others, to drop a heart below if it resonated, or to leave your comments behind. Like, what did this bring up for you? What questions do you have about this? And of course, to join us in this work of generational healing. Because this is exactly what we do inside the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, our online virtual movement and sanctuary where you get to tend to the ancestral garden, where you get to rebuild that inner temple through Kundalini Yoga therapy meditation and through A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy. And for those of you that have asked, no, you don't have to have any experience with any type of inner work, meditation, yoga, spiritual psychotherapy. You just have to be willing. You have to be willing to heal and not just heal yourself, but heal seven generations before and after you. Because what we're doing inside the sanctuary with our weekly body, mind, spirit, generational healing teachings, with our nervous system regulation practices, with the Kundalini Yoga therapies you need specifically for patterns of generational trauma with the Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy integration, which brings healing at the level of the mind, helps you a lot with forgiveness and truly accepting the Christ within you, and with the community and sisterhood. That's one of the most beautiful aspects of finding other high priestesses, because that's truly what these women are, that are on the same path, beyond gossip and all the things that a lot of women waste time in. We can actually come together for the purpose of not just healing ourselves, but healing our entire lineages, which to me is the highest, absolute highest form of activism that one can take in this lifetime. So if this is something that's resonating, that's calling to your heart, I'm gonna drop the link below here in the description so you can find out more about the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, where every month we focus on a specific generational healing theme that is going to get to the root cause. You're gonna water that ancestral garden and tend to it, because that is exactly why you incarnated into these bodies. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me on this beautiful, beautiful new episode of the Sovereign Sister Movement Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing it. Thank you for liking it. Thank you for bringing other beautiful women and high priestesses to our movement of generational healing. I'm excited to continue with the series of each of the systems. We're getting almost to the end of the next three systems left. So be sure to also listen to all of the previous podcast episodes if you missed any of them. We looked at the endocrine system, respiratory system, circulatory system, nervous system. I mean, we really are going after each and every one of them so that you can remember just how powerful you are. I will see you all in the next Sovereign Woman podcast video. It is time for us to reclaim our sovereignty 7 generations before and after us. Be blessed, everyone, and I'll see you next week.